Hey, this is Andrew Brown, and this fall along, I want to show you JQ. So JQ is a library that is for parsing JSON data. It's extremely useful and often comes pre-installed on operating systems. So in this cloud developer environment for Gitpod, it actually already is pre-installed. And so what I want to do is get you some hands-on experience with JQ. So I'm going to make a new folder here called JQ, and I'm making a new file called readme.md. I actually have this other repo where I have a tutorial on it. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy all this contents here. We'll paste it into here. Now, if you are watching this video, you can go to AWS Examples repo and grab this stuff and start using JQ. If you don't have JQ installed, you can install it a variety of ways. So maybe you need to do a sudo apt-get install JQ for Linux. Go look at the instructions on how to install it for your machine. I'm sure somewhere here it explains that. But anyway, let's go ahead and start utilizing this. So describe VPCs is a really great example, as that's going to return back some JSON data. And so notice we have JSON data here. And the first advantage here is that if we do JQ and put a period, which is selecting the root document, that's how we select the root document in JQ, is right away we're going to get this nice formatting, okay? So that is one really nice advantage here, just by passing it along. But let's start selecting things. So what we can do is select into the VPC and grab information there. So we'll go ahead and copy that. And I'm going to just go ahead and paste that in. Okay. And so now notice that it's selecting within the VPC and we have this square brace. What would happen if we did not include the period? Would that work? And the reason why I include that is that maybe something like JP would not require you to have a period and you could start selecting it. But in JQ, you have to explicitly put that period in the front to select at the root of the document. So understand that you can't just not have a period there. Let's select within that array. So I'm going to go back up to this command, and we're going to see that we have an array here. And let's put some square braces on the end. And notice that it's now selecting within the array. And so now it's curlies. And so with that, what we can do is we can say .cider block. And it didn't exactly work in this case, because the reason why it's not working is that we need to select within the square braces. Because remember, if we do this, right, it's square. You can't call cider block on an array. It's within the object. So if we go back up to here and then we typed in cider block, notice that we can get the value. But let's say we have JSON and we don't know if it's going to consistently return back data. So maybe it doesn't return an array, or sometimes it returns an object. We're just pretending that we're not doing describe VPCs here. And just in general, sometimes we have some variability with our JSON. Well, what we can do is we can put a question mark. And the idea is that if it encounters an error, it's just going to ignore it. So cider block is something that should not work, right? But notice it doesn't throw an error. So, if encountering an error, just ignore it, okay? And this is really useful if you don't want your bash scripts to exit out. And that could be a case that you want to occur. This will result in an error because we are not selecting from the root of the JSON. This will select VPC's key from the root of the JSON object. This will select the array of VPCs returning back JSON objects. This will error out because we are attempting to select an attribute on an array and not the array objects, okay? So then down below here, this is obviously, we just tried that and that worked. So that's how we would get that. Right now I'm in an area that only has a single VPC. So I could switch to some other region, or I could just create more. So I'm just going to go here to say Central 1. I'm just going to create a couple more VPCs. And yeah, that's okay. I don't care. It's just erroring out. We'll click here. And I'm going to say create VPC and just say my VPC2. And I don't know if that one was used, but 172.31.00. Create. Doesn't like that. Oh, sorry, 16. We'll create that VPC. We will try this again. We'll say create VPC. My VPC 04. I don't care what it is. We'll say 12.0.0.0. 16. I'll go ahead and do that. And so now I have a couple more VPCs, okay? And what I'm going to do here is just type in clear, and I'm going to hit up. And then now notice that I'm getting more data back, okay? So just understand that when you're doing square braces, it's selecting the objects within the array. So it's not a single object, it's an array of objects, but it's trying to select from those objects as opposed of on the array itself. Let's say we just wanted to get back the first one, then we could supply a 1, okay? And so this one is get back attribute CIDR block from first VPC, get back all attribute CIDR blocks from the array of objects. Here this would be an index, so this is between 1 and 2, so get back the VPC within the range of 1 and 2 and return the CIDR block. So if we could do this one here and copy and hit paste, we get an error. Cannot index array with CIDR block string. Okay, so that throws an error, and the reason why is because if we just do this, let's go above here for a second. What do we get? We get an array, okay? So just understand when you get that back, we're gonna have to put those squares on here. So if we put these squares on here, okay. Come on. Trying to copy and paste here, but we put these squares on the end here. Notice that now it's selecting the array of objects. Okay, we go back up again. We take this off. Now it's an array. Now, of course, it's only returning 1 because we said between the range of 1 and 2, but it's still an array of objects. So now if we try CIDR block, it's going to return back that 1. So select within the range of 1 and 2. We actually already did that before down here. Select within the range of 1 and 2. And technically this one is the one that's actually working here. Okay, so we go down here, and so this one's going to return an error. So this will return an error because the range will return an array. And we already know that we need to get the array of objects, not the array itself. Now, what if we did a range of 1 to 1? What would we get back? You'd think the first object, but we actually get nothing. If we did 2 to 2, what would we get back? Nothing. So this will return nothing because it's an index that is equal to 0, right? 1 to 1. So that's kind of interesting. Then we can select a range of, so let's say this is not a range, but this is going to get the first and second VPC. So that's another thing we can do. This one's really useful, I think. We'll hit enter. Sometimes it's pasting weird stuff in here. We'll hit enter. And so we get the first and second VPC. And we'll take a look here. Notice that it's returning an array of objects and not the array. So if we go ahead and try this, this should work, right? So we go down below, copy, hit enter, and we're getting the 2 there. Let's say we wanted to get another attribute. We want to also get the VPC ID. What we could try to do is we could try to string a bunch of commands together. And so what you can do is you can put a comma, and that will select 2 things at the same time. So we copy this, type in clear. What I'm hoping to get here is the first CIDR block and the first VPC ID. So that looks like it's working. Now what if I want to get for the first and the second one? Let's go ahead and try that. What do we get? We get the first and the second, so that's really nice. Okay. What if we want to just get it for the first one? I mean, that looks like the same as this line. Is this just the same line repeated twice? It is, so we'll just take that one out. Another thing you can do is you can take, let's say, an array, and then you can pipe it to a subcommand and then just select from there. So the idea is that you take this, you pass it here, and now this sub-object becomes the root. The array of objects is the root, so you'd be selecting period from that. So what we can do is copy this, paste that in. And so this is very similar to this command here, right? So this and this, right? I'm just going to copy this one here, this. Right? And this are the same thing. So why would you want to do this? Because you can have more flexibility when you're piping over to here, and you can really make the expression a lot easier. It really depends on what kind of expression you're writing. So some expressions are easier to write when you're piping them here. Some simply cannot be done without piping them to a subquery. And so just understand that you'll learn that as you try to write more complex JQ if you need to. If you don't need to, that's okay. You can get by with just basic JQ. But let's continue on here. So we started the piping here. Okay, so there's this one, and this one looks exactly the same, so I'm just going to take that out. So let's try to select the cider block and VPC ID. So we'll try this. Okay, so that's very similar to, not sure what it is, but very similar, kind of similar to this one here, except it's selecting from all of them. Notice we're getting back text. Let's say we want to return it back in a JSON structure. Well, I think we can put these curlies on here and then provide the key and ID. Let's take a look and see what we get. And it didn't copy properly, just typing clear. Notice I'm just struggling with copy paste here. We'll hit enter. And it complains, VPC 0 is not defined at the top level. Okay, so the issue here is we still have to have that period, right? So we'll go ahead and do the next line. This will result in an error. We'll go ahead and copy the next one. Some of these are intentionally supposed to run into errors. So now we get this back in a JSON structure. So format the first VPC in this format. And also notice here, we put a 0 in here. And up here, we've been doing 1s and 2s. So just understand which one it's been selecting. And that's something we should be paying attention to. So let's go back over to here, copy this one, right? We did enter. And notice we get this first, second, third. So what happens if we do 1? Okay, that's actually the second one. This starts at 0. Okay. So we wrote first, and that's not true. So I'm just looking here. So this is actually gets the second one, and then this one gets the second and third one. All right, so that's a good indicator here. Let's say we wanted to get back a JSON object for the first and second VPC ID in that structure that we want. So a lot of times you're going to want to turn that back into JSON, right? We'll go ahead and hit enter. And there is our structure. So that's looking really good. This line down below is identical. Again, I'm not sure why I have identical lines in here. But what we'll do here is just take this out. This one here is just showing you that you can take a JQ object or like a JSON object and pass it here and parse it. That one might not work, so maybe we have to wrap this in double quotations. Let's try this. Should work. It's in here. No, it's not working. We'll take it out of here. But I could have swore that would work. What do we have here? We have 0, 1. And so now it looks like it might just take in the actual key name. Let's see what happens if we do this. What do we get? Okay, so notice it's picking up the keys. So here we're providing them, and here we're just saying use the key names it has. Then we have this one. Again, we're just piping here. Notice this syntax is a lot cleaner, right? So this was a little bit more verbose. This one looks to be the same as this one here. So we'll give this one a go. Will this work? Because it doesn't have a period in front of it. Okay, so we hit enter. Notice we got an error, so that's going to have an error because there's no root on it. No root being selected. So we'll go get the next one. We'll hit enter. Okay, so we get back that. And then we have a much more complex example. So I believe I actually used this for something. like in production. And so that's why I brought this example here. But the idea is that let's say we want to export these two environment variables. Okay, so now we have a username and password. And the idea is that we're providing an argument to JQ saying, set this as user, set this as password, and then make this JSON here. So we'll go ahead and try that out. We'll hit enter. And so now we get back a JSON object. And so this is a great way to take environment variables and then turn it into a JSON file, which you might need for some kind of configuration file. And then the next thing we can do is we can actually dump this out to an actual JSON file. So I'm just going to make sure that I'm in the right directory here. I'm just going to go over back to JQ. There we go. And I'm going to run this. We hit enter. And so now if we go here, we have a creds.json and we have a user and a password. We can cat that out to make sure that it works. Okay, I'm gonna delete this because sometimes GitHub will think that this is like credentials and they might like complain to us. So I'm gonna take that out. But hopefully that gives you kind of an idea of how JQ works. If that doesn't make total sense, you can read up on the documentation here as they have a bunch of examples. What I was doing is I was going through and figuring out all the things here. You can read them if you want. There's a bunch of built-in functions and stuff that we weren't using. So there's definitely a lot of stuff that you can do. So like, let's say we wanted to floor a number. Notice you could do JQ floor. So there's a bunch of stuff that we could do other than that. But basically, this is the basic filtering that we were doing, which was selecting stuff. And so hopefully that gives you an idea about how all this stuff works. But yeah, there you go.